Welcome to the Special Forces in World War II podcast, transmitting on this frequency. This broadcast is your dedicated channel for comprehensive intelligence regarding World War II Special Forces operations. Our transmissions encompass in-depth analysis of their strategic maneuvers, cutting-edge equipment, illustrious biographies, and an array of pertinent subjects. The orchestration of these transmissions is executed by the expert team of the Special Forces in World War II website, a squad deeply immersed in the historical theatre. For further insights, visual aids, and captured moments frozen in time, navigate to our virtual headquarters at worldwar2-soft.com. Your immersion into the front lines of knowledge awaits. Over and out. Welcome back to another episode of the Special Forces in World War II podcast, where we explore the bold, the daring, and the extraordinary tactics that helped shape the outcome of the greatest conflict in modern history. I'm your host, Michael Wires, and as always, we're here to unravel the hidden stories behind the daring exploits of World War II. On the night of July 9th, 1943, the 1st Air Landing Brigade takes off from North Africa, bound for the southeastern coast of Sicily. As part of the opening phase of Operation Husky, their objective is clear. The objective is to establish a large airborne invasion force on the ground near the town of Syracuse, secure the Ponte Grande Bridge, take out the strongpoints, and ultimately take control of the city itself with its strategically vital docks, as a prelude to the full-scale invasion of Sicily. Operation Ladbroke marks the first large-scale Allied airborne assault of the Second World War, but it does not go as planned. Poor weather, inexperienced glider pilots, and intense enemy resistance lead to heavy casualties before many of the men even reach the ground. Of the 145 gliders that set out, fewer than half land near their designated targets. Some are released too early, crashing into the sea, while others scatter miles from their objectives. Despite the chaos, isolated groups of British troops fight to complete their mission, holding key positions with limited ammunition and mounting casualties. In the previous podcast, we explored the coup de main raid on the Ponte Grande and Railway Bridge by A and C companies of the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment of the 1st Air Landing Brigade. In this episode, we examine the critical role of the complete 1st Air Landing Brigade during the invasion of Sicily, the challenges they faced, and the importance of their mission to the success of the wider Allied landings. Welcome to Special Forces in World War II podcast, and the story of the 1st Air Landing Brigade during Operation Ladbroke. Let's start at the beginning. Operation Ladbroke was a glider landing mission undertaken by British airborne troops near Syracuse, Sicily, beginning on July 9, 1943, as part of Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily during the Second World War. It was the first large-scale Allied glider operation, launched from Tunisia by the British 1st Air Landing Brigade under the command of Brigadier Philip Hicks. The mission involved a force of 136 Waco Hadrian gliders and 8 airspeed Horsa gliders, with the objective of landing near Syracuse to secure the Ponte Grande Bridge and ultimately capture the city, including its strategically important docks, in preparation for the full-scale invasion of Sicily. By December 1942, with Allied forces advancing through Tunisia, the North African campaign was drawing to a close. As victory in North Africa became imminent, discussions among the Allies turned to determining their next objective. Many American commanders advocated for an immediate invasion of northern France, while the British, as well as General Dwight D. Eisenhower, argued that the island of Sardinia would be a more suitable target. In January 1943, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and US President Franklin D. Roosevelt met at the Casablanca Conference and decided that Sicily would be the next Allied target. The invasion was expected to open key Mediterranean shipping routes and provide airfields closer to mainland Italy and Germany. The codename for this invasion was Operation Husky, and planning commenced in February. Initially, the British Eighth Army, under General Sir Bernard Montgomery, was assigned to land on the southeastern corner of Sicily and advance north towards Syracuse. 2 days later, the U.S. Seventh Army, commanded by General George S. Patton, was to land on the western coast and advance towards Palermo. However, in March, the plan was revised to have both armies land simultaneously along a 160-kilometer stretch of coastline to maximize their impact and prevent Axis forces from defeating the Allied armies in turn. In support of these amphibious landings, Major General George F. Hopkinson's British 1st Airborne Division and Major General Matthew Ridgway's U.S. 82nd Airborne Division were tasked with conducting airborne operations behind enemy lines. General Montgomery revised the plans again in early May, insisting that airborne troops should be landed near Syracuse to secure the valuable port. Consequently, the British 1st Airborne Division's mission was expanded to include 3 key objectives: capturing the Ponte Grande Bridge, securing the port of Augusta, and taking the Primosole Bridge over the River Simeto. The 1st Air Landing Brigade faced additional setbacks due to a shortage of serviceable gliders. In early May, the Waco gliders began to arrive in North Africa, although they did not arrive ready to fly. Instead, the first batch was neatly packed in wooden crates at La Senia Airfield in Oran, Algeria. Not wanting to wait for someone else to begin assembly, 6 officers and 62 non-commissioned officers from the Glider Regiment moved to La Senia on May 8, 1943, uncrated, and assembled the gliders, using the empty crates for accommodation. Within 10 days, and with the help of 2 American fitters, they assembled 52 Wacos, which were then flown to Froha and Thiersville by C-47s. An additional 500 Wacos were shipped from the United States at the start of May. As they arrived at various North African ports, the Americans began assembling them urgently. However, many challenges arose due to the haphazard unloading of the crates, causing parts to be scattered across multiple locations and vital instruments occasionally missing. Despite these setbacks, by June 13, 1943, 346 Wacos were completed and delivered to the 51st Wing. However, many were grounded for repairs by June 16, 1943, and by June 30, 1943. Weaknesses in the wire bracing of the tail units led to all gliders being grounded for 3 days. Intercom sets between the gliders and towing aircraft were unavailable until just before the operation began. The American 51st Troop Carrier Wing, previously involved in Operation Torch, was now assigned to the 1st Airborne Division for the Sicily invasion. The wing set up its operations room at Mascara in May 1943 to coordinate British and American activities. The 51st Wing was part of the American Troop Carrier Command, established in the United States in April 1942 for moving airborne forces. At Mascara, Royal Air Force representatives from No. 38 Wing, who had flown out to North Africa, attempted to share British airborne experience, but their unsolicited suggestions were often ignored. The situation might have improved with the arrival of Sir Nigel Norman, a charismatic leader whose influence would have been hard to dismiss. However, the No. 38 Wing, Royal Air Force personnel, received the sad news that Sir Nigel had been killed en route. Despite these difficulties, an intensive 3-week training program was carried out at Fraught, where the Glider Regiment's No. 2 Squadron was based, and at another airstrip in Mascara called Relizan, which became the base for No. 3 Squadron. During this period, 1,363 daytime lifts and 510 nighttime lifts were completed. The 51st Wing's C-47s were stationed at Thiersville and Matmore under Colonel R.A. Dunn's command. The wing had no previous experience of towing gliders, having focused on paratroop operations during Operation Torch. Throughout the winter since November, its aircraft had been used for transporting men and supplies owing to the inadequate road and railway systems in North Africa, leaving no time for training in glider towing operations. Given Churchill's insistence on an early operation date, only 3 weeks were available for joint training between the wing and the airborne troops. This minimal preparation time was recognized as insufficient, but there was no alternative. During the training period, the majority of the Wacos were assembled and maintained by members of the Glider Pilot Regiment. At the beginning of July 1943, Operation Order No. 1 for both air landing battalions is signed. From the 3rd to the 7th of July 1943, the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, and the 1st Battalion, the Border Regiment's officers and troops participate in briefings for Operation Husky. Company commanders received their instructions on July 3, 1943, followed by operational officers on July 4, 1943. Although the North African sun is blisteringly hot, the briefings must be conducted indoors for secrecy, as the camps are not protected by the high walls of a barracks, but are instead located in open olive groves. In the days that follow, the men of the 1st Air Landing Brigade, the 181st Air Landing Field Ambulance, Royal Army Medical Corps, and the 9th Field Company, Royal Engineers, learn they are to participate in Operation Ladbroke, acting as the vanguard for the entire invasion of Sicily. Their mission is to land ahead of all other forces on the late evening of July 9, 1943. The 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, is one of 2 glider-borne battalions in the 1st Air Landing Brigade of the 1st Airborne Division. The 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, is tasked with capturing or destroying any infrastructure that could impede the advance of British seaborne forces along Highway 115 towards Syracuse. The 1st Battalion, Border Regiment, is to land alongside the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, and then advance through their positions to capture the outskirts of Syracuse. The 8 objectives set for the 1st Air Landing Brigade during Operation Ladbroke are codenamed. Waterloo is the codename for the Ponte Grande, a triple bridge that serves as the key objective of Operation Ladbroke, carrying Highway 115 and providing a strategic route into Syracuse. Putney refers to the railway bridge over the Mamayabica and Seine rivers. It is unclear whether the codename also covers the railway bridge over the Anapo River or any surrounding areas. Bilston is a large strongpoint that straddles Highway 115. Nat refers to a gun battery that once defended Syracuse's harbour. Walsall is a strongpoint along Highway 115, located south of the Ponte Grande. Mosquito was a battery of guns near Highway 115. Dudley and Gornal. A company of the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, is ordered to land in Landing Zone 3 North, with the objectives to occupy Dudley, capture Gornal, and establish defensive positions around Putney. It remains unclear where exactly Dudley and Gornal were located, although it is presumed they were near Landing Zone 3 North and Putney. One of them may have been the strongpoint located between the 2 railway bridges. The insect codenames refer to Italian gun batteries, which typically include gun emplacements, barracks, and sometimes range finders and fire control bunkers. The Waterloo and Putney bridges in London serve as code names for bridges over the three waterways south of Syracuse, the Anapo, Mamayabica, and Seine rivers. The remaining names are towns in the Black Country region, northwest of Birmingham. These code names are used for Italian strongpoints, typically consisting of pillboxes surrounded by barbed wire. 3 landing zones are designated for use by the 1st Air Landing Brigade. Landing Zone 3, divided by both the railway line and the Canal Mamayabica, lies within 1.6 kilometers of both the Ponte Grande and the railway bridge. A and C companies of the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, along with a detachment of Royal Engineers from the 9th Field Company under their command, are assigned to land here to conduct a coup de main raid on the bridges. Their objective is to launch an immediate assault to overwhelm the garrisons, securing the bridges until the main elements of the 1st Air Landing Brigade arrive. The remainder of the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, is to land approximately 3.2 kilometers to the south on the larger Landing Zone 1, while the entirety of the 1st Battalion, Border Regiment, is to land about 1.6 kilometers east of them at Landing Zone 2. These forces are tasked with marching to the bridges to consolidate the brigade's hold, with the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, securing secondary objectives along the way, including 2 enemy strongpoints and both inland and coastal gun batteries. The 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, is divided into 2 task-oriented groups, North Force and South Force, each charged with precise objectives aimed at dismantling enemy defenses and securing strategic locations. North Force comprises A Company and C Company, with attached troops, tasked with seizing and fortifying the key areas of Waterloo and Putney. A company sets its sights on the vital areas of Dudley and Gornal, aiming to secure and fortify them against enemy advances. Once established, they will create a defensive stronghold at Putney and disrupt enemy logistics by blocking major north-south and east-west roads. To support their operations, an ammunition dump will be established near the bridge. The company is equipped with Bangalore torpedoes, rabbit wire, grappling irons, and number 18 wireless sets to ensure mission success. C Company is tasked with the capture of Waterloo Bridge, a critical objective for maintaining strategic control. They will occupy the high ground 365 meters north of Walsall, establish roadblocks, and patrol factory buildings south of Calshot. If feasible, C Company will proceed to capture Walsall after consolidating their hold on Waterloo. Their operations are supported by flamethrowers, Bangalore torpedoes, rabbit wire, and wireless communication equipment. South Force, consisting of the remainder of the battalion, excluding A and C companies, focuses on neutralizing enemy installations and securing additional strategic locations. D Company, supported by the 9th Field Company Royal Engineers, is charged with destroying the Mosquito Coastal Battery, a pivotal enemy position. Following this, they will prepare to attack additional gun positions and support operations at Waterloo if necessary. Equipped with handcarts, Bangalore torpedoes, and wireless sets, they are well prepared for their tasks. By July 5, 1943, the 1st Battalion, Border Regiment, faces challenges in securing specialized equipment required for the operation. Despite these obstacles, the atmosphere remains optimistic. One day later, the commanding officer delivers an address to all officers and non-commissioned officers, emphasizing the critical role of junior leaders in the upcoming mission. Under company arrangements, other ranks receive their briefings, displaying enthusiasm and confidence. Meanwhile, the quartermaster works tirelessly to distribute extra ammunition and equipment. At Sousse, on July 6, 1943, a series of explosions occur when the divisional ammunition dump catches fire, causing thousands of tons of explosives to detonate. All hands are mobilized to combat the blaze, but significant losses occur, including ammunition, equipment, and the personal kits of the glider pilot regiment. Several men are injured by flying fragments, but there are no fatalities. The blast destroys tents, small arms, and equipment, prompting frantic efforts to replace everything before the move to the takeoff strip on July 7, 1943. By July 9, 1943, the quartermaster's staff has miraculously managed to restore order. On July 8, 1943, General Montgomery visits the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment in Sousse, accompanied by senior officers, including General Browning. His presence inspires the men and raises spirits. That very same day, the 1st Battalion, Border Regiment, also receives a visit from General Montgomery, commander of the British 8th Army. Addressing all ranks, Montgomery welcomes them to the 8th Army and acknowledges the value of airborne troops, which he notes have been a long-missing component of the force. Later that day, Major T. Haddon, the 1st Battalion, Border Regiment's second-in-command, attends a conference at divisional headquarters. There, plans for the bombing of Ladbroke ahead of the 1st Battalion, Border Regiment's attack, are reviewed and finalized without any changes. Throughout the day, gliders at nearby airfields are loaded with supplies in preparation for the operation. On July 9, 1943, the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, holds a final church service in Sousse before embarking on their mission. At 15:10, soldiers board transport vehicles for the journey to the airfields, marking the beginning of their active involvement in Operation Husky. The day of Operation Ladbroke dawns with an unseasonal 48 km/h wind, which causes Colonel Chatterton to revise the cast-off heights for the gliders. Originally calculated for calm air, the Wacos are still to release 2,750 meters offshore, but the height is raised by 90 meters. Gliders bound for Landing Zone 1, mainly towed by C-47s from the 60th Group, will release at 550 meters, while those bound for Landing Zone 2, towed by the 62nd Group, will release at 540 meters, 425 meters. This decision is made too late to reach many of the combinations before takeoff. The mission's approach to the landing zones, designed to reduce exposure to anti-aircraft fire, takes the aircraft parallel to the coast between Cap Passaro and Cap Muro di Porco, enabling tugs to turn out to sea after release. The objective is to minimize exposure to the heavy flak defending Syracuse. The planning for the bombing of Syracuse to support the glider landings of Operation Ladbroke faced significant delays, despite the overall invasion plan for Sicily being nearly 6 months old. The concept of starting the invasion by deploying airborne troops had been in discussion since January, and the specific plan to land gliders near Syracuse had been in development since May. However, as late as July 9, 1943, the day of Operation Ladbroke, Lieutenant Colonel Goldsmith, the staff officer responsible for operations for the British 1st Airborne Division, was still unsure about the air support his troops would receive. Goldsmith first visited the No. 205 Bomb Group, Royal Air Force, on July 3, 1943, just a week before D-Day on July 10, 1943. As the officer responsible for the operations of the 1st Airborne Division, he was highly concerned about the lack of information especially as specific target requests had already been submitted by the 1st Airborne Division to Allied Forces Headquarters on May 23, 1943, nearly 7 weeks earlier. The No. 205 Bomb Group, Royal Air Force, which consisted of several squadrons of Wellington medium bombers, was earmarked by Allied Forces Headquarters to provide bomber support for the 1st Airborne Division. These squadrons were based at airfields around Kairouan in Tunisia, approximately 65 kilometers west of the 1st Airborne Division's headquarters near Masakan, Tunisia. The drive from Masakan across the flat semi-desert was straightforward, which was fortunate as Goldsmith had to make the journey several times. His initial visit on July 3, 1943, where he met Group Captain Simpson, the senior air staff officer of No. 205 Bomb Group, Royal Air Force, proved to be unproductive. Despite being cooperative, Simpson had not received instructions from his superiors at Northwest African Strategic Air Force, and the group had no information on their bombing role. Unsurprisingly, little progress was made. On July 5, 1943, Northwest African Strategic Air Force issued a directive listing diversionary targets, including Syracuse, prompting Goldsmith to return to No. 205 Bomb Group, Royal Air Force, on July 7, 1943. However, Simpson had still not received specific instructions, but promised to attend a conference at the 1st Airborne Division's headquarters in Masakan the following day, along with his wing commanders. The conference on July 8, 1943, was reported as most satisfactory, but once again, Simpson had still not received any instructions from higher authority. On July 9, 1943, the day of the invasion, Goldsmith returned, and finally, there was progress. Simpson had been promoted to Air Commodore and Air Officer Commanding, and, more importantly, had now received the necessary instructions. Goldsmith complained that even at this stage, there was still the perception that the Syracuse mission was primarily a diversion to deceive and distract the Italians from the invasion. In reality, the bombing mission had a specific tactical purpose in support of the glider operation. He wrote, "There was still no suggestion that this task had any connection with ground operations, nor was this information given to No. 205 Bomb Group, Royal Air Force, by Northwest African Strategic Air Force at any later time." Simpson, however, advocated for the 1st Airborne Division. Well after midnight, on July 9, 1943, at 1:32, he sent a signal to Northwest African Strategic Air Force, informing his superiors of his intentions rather than waiting for instructions. As a result of the conference with divisional headquarters of the 1st Airborne Division, there is no confusion over our immediate commitments, and any last-minute alterations must be notified to us by the 1st Airborne Division headquarters. The plan, as arranged between 1st Airborne Division headquarters and ourselves, is clear-cut, and any alteration will jeopardize the complete Army plan. This message effectively stated that the entire invasion of Sicily was in jeopardy if Northwest African Strategic Air Force did not comply with the 1st Airborne Division's requests. It was unusual for orders to flow in this direction, from No. 205 Bomb Group, Royal Air Force, to NASAF, since orders typically flowed from Northwest African Strategic Air Force to No. 205 Bomb Group, Royal Air Force. Simpson's assertive message was likely influenced by the urgency and the fact that it was his first day in command. Northwest African Strategic Air Force responded 10 hours later at 11:17 with an emergency priority message from its commander, Major General Doolittle. Doolittle, renowned as the hero of the 1942 Tokyo bombing raid, denied Simpson's request for a maximum effort on behalf of the 1st Airborne Division. Instead, he directed that bombing efforts be spread to 4 additional towns, thereby reducing the number of planes allocated for the bombing of Syracuse. The decision, to be fair, was influenced by an 11th-hour directive from General Alexander, the army commander of the entire invasion. Doolittle's response was measured, but slightly reprimanding. These instructions do not agree with your existing arrangements with 1st Airborne Division. Keep in mind the fact that Wellingtons are required for purposes other than support and diversion for airborne troops. You should conform to the above target instructions in addition to any arrangements made with 1st Airborne Division. Doolittle's words, referring to support and diversion, reflected the dual nature of No. 205 Bomb Group, Royal Air Force's tasking. The bombing of Syracuse directly supported the advance of the glider troops, while a simultaneous raid on Catania aimed to divert Italian attention from Syracuse. The distinction between support and diversion became academic, as the bombing plan for Syracuse remained unchanged. Loading of the gliders begins at 1100 hours on July 9, 1943, and by 1840 hours, the men of the 2 battalions of the 1st Air Landing Brigade are boarding their assigned craft, preparing for takeoff. A few minutes later, the 1st glider-tug combination becomes airborne, and within 90 minutes, all aircraft have left their bases and are assembling into formation. Problems arise almost immediately during takeoff. 7 gliders are lost before the fleet even leaves North Africa. 2 cast off shortly after leaving the ground, while the rest are forced to return to base due to various issues, ranging from dangerously unbalanced payloads in the gliders to engine malfunctions in the tug aircraft. Later, a Waco glider is inexplicably cast off over North Africa. Believing they are in Sicily, the men set up an ambush along a road in the middle of the desert, far from the terrain they had expected. Eventually, a jeep from a British mobile bath unit appears, and the men realize their mistake. They are offered a lift back to base. The loss of these gliders is not unusual, as glider operations are inherently prone to broken tow ropes and other challenges. Without further incidents, the remaining formations reach the rendezvous point several kilometers out to sea, east of Kairouan. However, as they turn towards Malta, they encounter strong winds of up to 72 kilometers per hour, making it difficult for the glider and tug pilots to maintain formation. As the aircraft round the southeastern coast of Malta, a hawser and 2 Wacos come down in the sea. One of the Wacos may have been mistakenly released over Malta, with the crew thinking it was Sicily. On board are members of a company headquarters of the 1st Battalion, Border Regiment. Upon disembarking, they hear a jeep approaching and attempt to persuade the British occupants, assumed to be airborne troops from another unit, to give them a lift to the battalion rendezvous. After a series of refusals and a heated exchange, it becomes apparent that they are, in fact, in Malta, and that their glider is blocking a runway, preventing fighter aircraft from taking off. The majority of the glider force reaches Malta, but the situation deteriorates as they head north towards Sicily. Strong winds continue to cause difficulties, leading to combinations becoming separated from the formation. The invasion timing is designed to take advantage of moonlight for visual navigation, but gathering cloud cover obscures the moon, making conditions hazardous. The darkness makes it nearly impossible for glider pilots to maintain sight of their tug aircraft, let alone avoid other combinations that occasionally come dangerously close to colliding. In several instances, glider pilots find themselves flying parallel to or even overtaking their tugs, creating a risk of breaking tow ropes or damaging tug engines when realigning and causing a sudden strain on the tow cable. As the formation approaches Sicily, the sound of aircraft engines draws the attention of Italian anti-aircraft batteries, which open fire. The bright muzzle flashes further complicate the already difficult task for navigators and pilots attempting to identify landmarks. Surviving searchlights from earlier Royal Air Force hurricane attacks scan the skies, illuminating the aircraft and gliders. The inexperience of some American tug crews becomes evident under fire. The anti-aircraft fire is largely ineffective, causing no damage to any aircraft. However, the noise and flashes create panic among some American crews, leading to confusion. Some aircraft, though far from direct fire, are intimidated and turn back to North Africa with their gliders still in tow. Others release their gliders mid-air at random altitudes and in any direction, leaving the men inside with little hope of reaching land. Most aircrews attempt to position their gliders correctly, but the chaotic scene, with aircraft flying in all directions, makes it impossible to maintain formation or navigate accurately. As a result, the 144 gliders, excluding those lost earlier, are scattered, many up to 48 kilometers from their intended landing zones. Numerous gliders are released far out to sea, well beyond the planned 3,200 meters. Half of the 1st Air Landing Brigade, comprising 73 gliders, ends up ditching in the Mediterranean. Only 56 gliders reach Sicily, and of these, just 12 manage to land on or near their designated zones. Fortunately for those who come down in the sea, the gliders have natural buoyancy in their wings, which in most cases keeps them afloat for several hours before breaking apart. However, the fuselage, where the passengers are seated, sinks beneath the waves almost immediately. The moments following impact are ones of sheer desperation as men frantically attempt to hack their way out before going under. Many do not escape in time. Out of the 1,730 men of the 1st Air Landing Brigade, 326 drown. While the majority survive, those stranded far out to sea have no choice but to cling to the wings for up to 10 hours, hoping the Royal Navy will locate them by morning. One of the missions of Operation Ladbroke is the coup de main of the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment. The initial wave of 6 Horsa gliders is scheduled to land at the bridge at 23:15 to attempt an immediate capture, followed 2 hours later by the main force, landing within a 5-kilometer radius of the bridge. Prior to the attack, 55 Wellington bombers conduct raids on targets around Syracuse, resulting in the death of the Italian naval base commander Giuseppe Gianotti. To further confuse the defenders, nearly 300 dummy paratroopers are dropped north of the landing zone. At the Ponte Grande Bridge, a single Horsa glider lands, carrying a platoon of infantry from the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment. With approximately 15 men on board, the infantry, led by Lieutenant Whiters, is split into 2 groups. One group swims across the river, allowing for a coordinated assault from both sides. The Italian guards of the 119 Gradi Reggimento Fanteria Emilia abandon their posts and the bridge is captured. The British quickly remove the demolition charges, preparing to hold the bridge until reinforcements arrive. Only 4 Horsa gliders land within a 3-kilometer radius of the bridge, one of which explodes upon landing, killing all on board. By 6:30 in the morning, the British defenders number only 87 men. Despite limited reinforcements arriving, only 87 men are present at the bridge by morning. The British defenders face repeated counterattacks by Italian forces, who bring reinforcements throughout the day. The first Italian counterattacks begin at around 10 in the morning, launched by the Italian 385th Coastal Battalion, and a battalion from the 75 Reggimento Fanteria, Napoli. Initially, the defenders managed to repel several attacks using their limited ammunition and hold their position against overwhelming odds. The Italians launch mortar and artillery bombardments to weaken the British position, followed by infantry assaults. The British troops dig in and take up defensive positions on both sides of the bridge, using what little cover they can find. The fighting becomes increasingly desperate as Italian forces continue their efforts to recapture the bridge. The British defenders, outnumbered and low on supplies, use captured Italian weapons and ammunition to hold off the attacks. At one point, the defenders resort to hand-to-hand combat as Italian troops attempt to overrun their positions. Despite their exhaustion, the British troops continue to fight tenaciously, determined to hold the bridge until reinforcements arrive. By midday, the British are nearly out of ammunition, and their numbers have dwindled due to casualties. Only 15 soldiers remain unwounded, and they are forced to make a final stand. Italian forces, now reinforced with additional troops and artillery, launch a coordinated assault from multiple directions. By 3:30 in the afternoon, the British defenders, with no remaining ammunition, are overwhelmed and forced to surrender. However, their efforts have delayed the Italians long enough to prevent the destruction of the bridge, as the earlier removal of explosives by the British troops ensures its survival. Just an hour after the Italians retake the bridge, the first units of the British 5th Infantry Division, which had landed that morning, arrive at the site. For the second time, the bridge falls into British hands intact, and this time it remains so permanently. While the coup de main party was fighting at the bridge, the other units of the 2nd of the battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, had great difficulty in completing their missions, mainly due to bad landings. The 1st glider of battalion headquarters of the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, led by Lieutenant Colonel McCarty, Captain Connellan, and Lieutenant Roberts, crashes into the sea, roughly 3.2 kilometers from the shore. As the glider plunges into the cold waters, chaos ensues. Amidst the struggle, 2 men are lost to the depths. Determined to press on, McCarty and Major Murray, the senior glider pilot, swim to shore under fire. Battling exhaustion and evading enemy patrols, they reach Ponte Grande, where the British forces hold their ground. Meanwhile, the remaining survivors are rescued by naval craft and transported to Suez. In the 2nd glider, Major Brennan, Captain Miller, and Lieutenant Austin face their own grim fate. Their aircraft crashes only 230 meters offshore, but danger lurks even closer. Machine gun fire rains down on the team, fatally striking Lieutenant Austin as he attempts to escape. The surviving members, including Brennan, Miller, and 2 glider pilots, Lieutenants Impey and Robson, swim ashore. Undeterred, they begin a grueling journey inland. Crawling through 6 meters of barbed wire under the watchful eye of a pillbox, they push forward. Over 16 kilometers of hostile terrain, they regroup with 3 men from an anti-tank detachment and 6 soldiers from E Company. Along the way, they overpower 2 pillboxes, capturing 21 enemy soldiers, 3 machine guns, and an anti-tank gun. Their arrival at Ponte Grande by evening is bittersweet, as Lieutenant Impey succumbs to a self-inflicted accidental gunshot wound, a tragic end to his valiant efforts. The 3rd glider lands amidst a hostile environment at Cape Muro di Porco. Major Hargroves, commander of S Company, and Captain Reverend A. Buchanan find themselves surrounded by enemy machine gun posts. Despite their efforts, they are captured. Their ordeal is cut short when Special Raiding Squadron forces intervene, liberating them on July 10, 1943. By the following day, they rejoin the battalion, their spirits undeterred by the harrowing experience. The fourth and last glider of battalion headquarters meets the most tragic end, crashing into the sea 6.4 kilometers from land. Lieutenant Warnford and 2 other soldiers are lost to the unforgiving waters. Lieutenant Ashburnham and the remaining survivors cling to life until they are rescued by naval vessels and brought safely to Malta. Major R.H. Kane commands B Company, 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, which is transported in 10 Waco CG-4A gliders with the objective of securing a strongpoint approximately 3.2 kilometers south of Ponte Grande, Waterloo. 7 of the gliders successfully land, but the mission unfolds with numerous challenges and acts of bravery. Captain Foote, the second in command, organizes an assault on the company's objective, Bilston, with half of No. 12 Platoon, led by Sergeant Bradley and a group from the Border Regiment. Despite their efforts, the position proves too heavily defended, and the attack fails. The group becomes separated, but the following morning, Captain Foote gathers half of No. 11 Platoon and some Royal Engineers he encounters to launch a second assault. This attack also fails against the strong defenses. The group then heads north and attempts to seize E Company's objective, but this effort is likewise unsuccessful. Eventually, they regroup at Ponte Grande. Major Kane and half of company headquarters crash into the sea and swim to a small island. For 36 hours, they are pinned down by fire from an enemy machine gun position on the mainland. Finally, they swim ashore, neutralize the machine gun post, and rejoin the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment. Lieutenant Goodman, leading half of No. 11 Platoon, crash lands but pushes toward the company's objective. Along the way, his group captures 2 pillboxes. During the action, Lieutenant Goodman is wounded. Lieutenant Duchar, with half of No. 12 Platoon, lands on the coast and immediately engages the enemy upon landing. His group makes their way to Ponte Grande, where they play a crucial role in its defense. Lieutenant Anderson, with half of No. 14 Platoon, crashes into the sea. Tragically, 2 other ranks drown, but the remainder are rescued by naval craft. The other half of No. 14 Platoon lands on the coast, engages the enemy, kills 10 soldiers, and successfully rejoins the 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment. The 3-inch mortar detachment, led by Sergeant Bird, lands safely. They participate in minor skirmishes, during which they eliminate 3 enemy positions before rejoining the battalion the following day. 10 Waco CG-4. Gliders are tasked with transporting D Company, 2nd Battalion, South Staffordshire Regiment, on a mission to neutralize a coastal battery along the road between Syracuse and Noto, located 4.8 kilometers south of a key bridge. The battery, known as Nat, refers to a gun battery that defends Syracuse's harbor. Major J.E. Philp commands the operation, but none of the gliders reach their intended landing zone. Major Philp's glider crashes into the sea. He and half of company headquarters swim ashore and rejoin the battalion at 2000 hours on July 10, 1943. Captain Wright, leading the other half of company headquarters, lands on the southeastern tip of the Maddalena Peninsula. After minor skirmishes, his group links up with seaborne forces and rejoins the battalion on July 11, 1943. No. 19 Platoon, under Lieutenant Walters, has both its gliders crash into the sea. The personnel are rescued by naval craft, their mission cut short, but lives preserved. Of the 1st Battalion, the Border Regiment, only a few gliders reach the intended landing zone. it is hard to speak of any coordinated action by the battalion during the operation. There are some individual stories about units within the 1st Battalion, the Border Regiment. Waco CG-4, a glider number 57, departs from Strip C at 19:15 hours, circling for approximately 20 minutes to form up with the rest of the gliders. Once in formation, the flight heads out to sea. Before departure, all personnel receive instructions on actions to take in the event of a water landing, a successful landing at the designated zone, or a crash landing off course. The glider carries battalion headquarters, 1st Battalion, the Border Regiment, personnel, including Lieutenant Colonel Britton, Captain N.A.H. Stafford, Captain G.G. Black, Lieutenant J.S.D. Hardy, Sergeant Burton, Lance Corporal Toman, Lance Corporal Smith, Private Clark, Private Ditter, Private Cull, Corporal Day, and Sergeant Gilbert. The 2 pilots are Lieutenant Loughran and an American pilot. The flight is uneventful, and despite a heavy load, including a handcart, 5 folding cycles, and 2 number 18 radio sets, the glider performs well. Only 2 islands, presumed to be Linosa and Malta, are sighted until around 2000 hours when the Sicilian coast becomes visible to port. Sporadic anti-aircraft fire is encountered, but poses no threat. At what the crew believes is the correct release point, the tug disengages, unwilling to proceed further without evasive action. The glider is cast off at a height of 400 meters, still far from the coast. The glider descends along the south coast of Cap do Porco, aiming for the landing zone, but ultimately failing to reach the shore. Lieutenant Loughran issues a "prepare to ditch" order, which is not heard at the rear of the glider. The front emergency doors are jettisoned, but the rear doors remain locked as the glider hits the water. The fuselage floods immediately, yet there is no panic. Half the crew exits through the doors, while the remainder escape through the roof, which is split open by the first man out. This quick action saves lives. The crew regroups on the wings, shaken but unharmed, only to come under machine gun fire from enemy positions on the cliffs. Illumination flares launched by the enemy do little to improve their aim. With only 3 revolvers and 18 rounds of ammunition between them, the crew splits into small groups to attempt reaching the shore, prioritizing armed individuals to confront the enemy posts. Upon reaching land, they find themselves at the base of a cliff, unable to scale it to engage the enemy effectively. They decide to remain hidden until morning. At 2:20 hours on July 10, 1943, a bomber struck by anti-aircraft fire jettisons its payload into the sea nearby before crashing. Captain Stafford sustains wounds to his neck and hand in the explosion. At first light, the crew climbs to a higher ledge along the cliff, locating all but 3 members of their party. A successful retrieval mission to the gliders yields water, tinned food, and first aid supplies, improving their situation despite the lack of weapons. At 1000 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Britton decides to attempt a breakthrough to the battalion area, roughly 10 kilometers away. He and Lieutenant Hardy set off at 1400 hours, hoping to reach their destination by dawn. Progress is slow, covering 900 meters in the first 2 hours due to the rocky terrain. They decide to pocket their revolvers and proceed boldly. At 1700 hours, they encounter Lieutenant Green, who is escorting 30 to 40 prisoners but has no detailed information on the battalion's position. After refilling water bottles and having tea, they continue onward. En route, they come across a group of around 60 Italians, both soldiers and civilians. The armed soldiers surrender after being convinced the war is over. Their weapons are destroyed, before Lieutenant Colonel Britton and Lieutenant Hardy move on, receiving a cheer from the group as they leave. As night falls, they are stopped by two glider pilot regiment personnel accompanying a platoon of the South Staffordshire Regiment. Sharing a similar destination, the groups join forces and proceed to Waterloo. Their remaining journey is uneventful, and they report to brigade headquarters at 2000 hours. Exhausted and with tender feet, they take boots from prisoners to ease their discomfort. By 2100 hours, they reach the battalion area and rest overnight. The battalion moves into Syracuse at 0800 hours the following day. Parties are sent out to recover the wounded and arm unarmed personnel using enemy weapons. Captain Stafford is evacuated to a casualty clearing station on George Beach at 1000 hours on July 11, 1943. The remaining personnel travel to the battalion area on bicycles, bringing as much equipment as they can salvage from the gliders, using an old Italian car to assist with transport. Also, for the medical teams that are to support Operation Ladbroke, things do not go as planned. Of the 6 medical gliders that depart, only one successfully lands on the island. This glider carries the surgical team, led by Captain Rigby Jones and 4 members of Section 2. They move quickly, establishing a basic dressing station combined with a regimental aid post and working tirelessly to assist the wounded. Eventually, they join a main dressing station to work as a surgical team. Meanwhile, medical orderlies who land with the companies or swim ashore find themselves scattered across the battlefield. Despite being separated from their teams, these men work tirelessly, providing first aid wherever they are needed, fully justifying their inclusion in the mission with their quick and selfless actions. The failure of most of the medical services to arrive is a heavy blow, but those who manage to land begin operating within an hour. The decision to distribute highly trained medical orderlies widely throughout the battalions proves crucial, as the widespread casualties mean that each isolated group of injured soldiers receives the help they need. After the landing, it becomes evident that coordination is key. A staff officer from Airborne Forces needs to be attached to the headquarters of the relieving seaborne force, with access to ambulances to ensure swift evacuation of casualties. The chaos of the landing demonstrates the necessity of proper coordination between different forces for effective evacuation. Despite the setbacks, the medical services that do operate manage to provide efficient care. Every isolated penny packet of casualties receives prompt attention, which saves lives. The larger objective, known as Operation Husky, is for the brigade to capture the Ponte Grande Bridge over the River Napo and Chian, with a secondary aim of capturing the town of Syracuse. They are also tasked with neutralizing enemy strongholds and gun emplacements, landing on 4 designated landing areas, 2 smaller ones near Waterloo and 2 larger ones roughly 6 kilometers away. 2 orderlies are assigned to each of the larger landing areas, ready to assist as needed. Company collecting posts are established in each company area, staffed by Battalion Royal Army Medical Corps personnel, with 2 additional orderlies assisting with casualty collection. Regimental aid posts are set up alongside the dressing stations, with the regimental medical officer responsible for collecting casualties from company posts. The surgical team, equipped for essential forward surgery, initially operates near the bridge before moving on to Syracuse. The senior medical officer is stationed at Brigade HQ to supervise the implementation of the medical plan, while the Assistant Director of Medical Services of the 5th Division oversees evacuation behind the dressing stations. The gliders transport the field ambulance sections and the surgical team, each loaded to function independently if needed. Blitz buggies, stretcher trailers, and hand carts are used to move equipment and evacuate casualties within the brigade area. Each Royal Army Medical Corps member carries a small kit and haversack with essential supplies, while additional equipment is stored in the stretcher trailer, along with comfort supplies, plaster, and plasma. Benzedrine tablets, mepacrene, and mosquito cream are issued, while each glider carries a blanket and 18 liters of drinking water. The operation begins on the 9th of July, with 6 gliders departing in the evening for Sicily. The journey is turbulent, and all but one glider end up in the sea. Captain Rigby Jones and his team, landing safely, push to the pre-selected area, setting up a small dressing station at a farmstead. They treat over 30 casualties there, working tirelessly through the night and into the next day. It is not until late in the afternoon of D+1 that they can move on from the site. The Battalion Royal Army Medical Corps personnel, who land with the companies, face challenging circumstances, but their quick action and dispersed presence turn out to be beneficial. They are able to attend to the wounded swiftly, even in isolated pockets. The senior medical officer reaches the dressing station on the evening of D-Day and contacts the Deputy Assistant Director of Medical Services of the 5th Infantry Division. Within hours, arrangements are made for transport for casualties. The Assistant Director of Medical Services Airborne Division had already made contact with the 5th Infantry Division HQ and arranged for civilian ambulances to assist in clearing casualties. These ambulances are used on D+1 and D+2 to ensure that all casualties are moved to safety. By the end of D+2, all casualties have been cleared into seaborne medical services. On D+3, the air landing medical services leave the island with 2 officers and 12 other ranks of the field ambulance embarking for departure. The 1st Air Landing Brigade returns to North Africa on July 13, 1943. The losses during Operation Ladbroke are significant. Of the roughly 145 gliders carrying around 1,700 men, more than half ditched into the Mediterranean. Soldiers and aircrew struggled to escape the sinking fuselages. 326 men drowned, and many more were missing or wounded. In total, the 1st Air Landing Brigade lost 314 troops killed, and 174 are reported missing or wounded. The glider pilots also suffered heavily, with 14 killed and 87 missing or wounded. The toll on the medical teams is significant. They lose 2 men, 6 are wounded, and 16 are missing, including Captain Greaves. Approximately half of the casualties are due to glider crashes, with many injuries involving the lower limbs. Although the medical plan was never fully realized, the actions of the men on the ground prove its worth. The decision to distribute personnel throughout the brigade saves lives, and the presence of an officer at the seaborne headquarters is crucial for ensuring effective evacuation. The operation highlights the need for better equipment for the medical teams. Each glider party requires defensive weapons, in addition to sidearms, to ensure their safety during operations. Above all, the mission shows that in the most challenging circumstances, the men of the Royal Army Medical Corps step forward under fire and pressure to do their duty, to save lives no matter the cost. In the aftermath of the operation, an inquiry is conducted and several recommendations are made to improve future airborne operations, leading to changes in training procedures, coordination strategies, and glider tactics for subsequent missions. The lessons learned from Operation Ladbroke pave the way for more effective airborne operations in the future, including better training for air crews, improved coordination between gliders and towing aircraft, and more comprehensive planning to prevent the issues experienced during this crucial mission. Operation Ladbroke highlights the immense risks and sacrifices faced by airborne troops during the war. It serves as a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of airborne warfare, a test of courage, adaptability, and resilience. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Special Forces in World War II. If you enjoyed the story of the 1st Air Landing Brigade during Operation Ladbroke, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and tune in next time as we uncover more daring operations from the world's most legendary special forces. Your support helps us continue to bring you more stories of courage, daring, and the unsung heroes of the special forces of World War II. Be sure to tune in next time as we dive into yet another remarkable operation that helped shape the outcome of the war. Until then, keep your wits sharp, your courage steady, and remember, sometimes the most incredible victories come from the unlikeliest of places. This is Michael Wires, signing off from the Special Forces in World War II podcast. See you in the next episode. And that concludes this mission briefing, fellow warriors of knowledge. We've navigated through the trenches of information, delving deep into the battlefields of history. As we wrap up this episode in our campaign for understanding, remember that knowledge is your most potent weapon. Stay vigilant and keep sharpening your intellectual arsenal. We'll rendezvous again for another episode, continuing our relentless pursuit of enlightenment. Until then, keep your mind sharp, your curiosity burning, and your determination unwavering. Simultaneously, you are hereby alerted to our outposts on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, fortifying our information dissemination. Should you possess any pertinent intelligence to bolster our mission, transmit your findings with no hesitation. Your contributions shall be prominently acknowledged within the operational archives. Furthermore, for those prepared to provide substantial reinforcement, navigate to our Patreon forward base and enlist. Your support is integral to sustaining our forward thrust. Carry forth the legacy. Dismissed.